Hey there, interwebs, and welcome back to my new series, Flagshaming, where I look at all the state flags and shame the bad ones. Hint, that's most of them. If there's a flag or a part of a flag I don't like, I offer my design suggestions. Unlike the previous episode, this one's actually going to have some good official designs, so let's get to them. Number 6. Massachusetts. Traditionally, I go to Massachusetts every year to spend Christmas with the family, but I honestly don't recall ever seeing their flag anywhere. This is not a good sign. Before making this video, I took a guess that their flag is probably an SOS. Spoiler alert, I was completely right. Bonus points for being a plain white sheet to boot. Shame! The most disappointing part, though, isn't any aspect of this flag. It's the fact that Massachusetts already has a better flag that they don't use. This is their naval and maritime flag, which for all practical purposes is an acceptable variant, since Massachusetts no longer has its own navy. It's a little minimalistic, sure, but so is New Mexico's flag, and that thing took first place in NAVA's 2001 survey. For almost 200 years, from 1776 to 1971, Massachusetts used what's known as the pine tree flag as their official naval ensign. In 1971, they removed the caption but kept the rest of the flag. The rationale behind the pine tree was that the Mast Preservation Clause in the Massachusetts Charter of 1691 reserved all pine trees with a diameter over 24 inches for English use as ships' masts. The trees would be identified by a surveyor of the King's Woods and marked with a broad arrow symbol denoting them as property of the Crown. The locals weren't keen and adopted the tree as a symbol of independence. Think of this flag as a less reptilian and more arboreal version of the Gadsden flag. For my redesign, I wanted to use something similar to this flag for both Massachusetts and/or Maine, since both states have flags with pine trees and lone stars, but I felt it was too close to South Carolina's flag, which I'll get to shortly. Imagine my surprise when I learned Maine already has a variant flag incredibly similar to this. I guess my idea wasn't half bad, but we'll discuss that when we get to Maine. For Massachusetts, I changed the field to the shade of blue from their seal, and I assure you this will be the only time I change a state flag's non-blue field to a blue one. I put the pine tree front and center and marked it with the broad arrow in reference to the symbol's history. The current seal features an Algonquin with a bow and arrow, symbolizing the state's willingness to fight for freedom, but the arrow is pointing downward to symbolize their desire for peace. I put the broad arrow point down for the same reason. Wikipedia says the 5-pointed star on the seal represents the admission of Massachusetts as the 6th state in the Union, but I don't see how that works. I kept it, but made it 6-pointed instead. Number 7. Maryland. Geez, where do I start with this mess? It's got 4 clashing colors and is broken up into quadrants of slanty checkerboards and more quadrants. It's got too much color, too much detail, and too much character. It is objectively hideous. And I love it! I know I'm not the only one who feels this way either. It came in 4th place out of 72 in NAVA's 2001 survey, and lots of flag geeks agree that this is an ugly, ugly flag, but just find it appealing for that reason. There's even a term in the vexillological community, pulling a Maryland, or hitting the Maryland point, which refers to making something so bad it loops back around and becomes kinda good in a weird way. PSA, never try to pull a Maryland. You will fail and your flag will look awful. This was my first attempt at designing a personal flag. I wanted to do something similar to Maryland, and it's dreadful. I spent some time trying to dissect what makes Maryland's flag work, and I've come to the conclusion that it's the vexillological foil to your typical seal on a bedsheet. Rule number 1 is keep it simple. Neither are really simple, but Maryland's flag is ultimately just made up of geometric shapes, whereas SOS's use overly detailed images like people and landscapes. The pamphlet says a child should be able to draw it from memory, and while I wouldn't expect a first grader to get Maryland or an SOS completely correct, Maryland's flag is so distinct it'd still be recognizable. I can't say the same for an SOS, even if it were perfectly drawn. They both also use more than 3 basic colors, but everywhere that Maryland has a color, it's a large, easily distinguished area. SOS's use color to fill in details so small they become hard to see. Basically, SOS's seem simple, they're just a state seal on a solid field, but they're actually complicated. Maryland's flag seems complicated, but is actually fairly simple. One's easy to describe, but hard to draw, and the other's easy to draw and hard to describe. If Maryland's flag looks medieval and heraldic, that's because it is. The black and gold quadrants are the heraldic charge of Sir George Calvert, 1st Lord Baltimore, and the red and white crosses come from the Crossland family, which was his mother's side. It's officially blazoned quarterly, 1st and 4th, paleo 6, or in sable, a bend counterchanged. 2nd and 3rd, quarterly argent and gules, a cross buttony counterchanged. This standard looks like it belongs on a tilt yard, which makes it a good thing that Maryland's official state sport is jousting. Prithee, stout yeoman, I shit thee not. Speaking of sports, where I went to college, we had a lot of students from Maryland, and you could always tell who they were because they had a bumper sticker showing the state flag in the outline of a crab. The local students from the Philadelphia area were stuck using the Phillies P, and that's just sad. People who actually follow sports ball have informed me that the Phillies aren't even a good team. Shame on them, but 2 unique thumbs up to Maryland for their unique flag. Shine on, you crazy diamond. Number 8. South Carolina. I mentioned 2 states ago that I couldn't recall having ever seen the Massachusetts state flag despite traveling there annually. For contrast, when I was in Charleston a year ago for a cousin's wedding, I couldn't walk down the street without seeing a palmetto in every direction. It's just blue and crescents and palm trees as far as the eye can see. South Carolinians love their flag with good reason, and so do I. The original version was designed by Colonel William Moultrie in 1775 for South Carolinian troops to use in the Revolutionary War. His design, which came to be known as the Moultrie flag, was an indigo field adorned with a white crescent. The blue came from the state militia's uniforms, and they wore the crescent symbol on the front of their caps. The palm wasn't added until the start of the Civil War, and it's a reference to the palm tree barricades that defended Sullivan's Island from British cannon fire during the Revolution. If I have one complaint about the modern iteration, it's that the tree is a bit complex, but state law doesn't provide specifications for the shape, size, design, or placement of the tree, so you can make it as complicated or as simple as you want. Good job, South Carolina. Mythology side note. According to legend, once the phoenix has lived for 500 years, it builds its nest at the top of the tallest palm tree it can find, bursts into flame, and rises again from the ashes. This is the city flag of San Francisco. If South Carolina were to annex them, somehow, they could combine the 2 symbols and have a solid mythology reference. Number 9. New Hampshire. Ugh! This is the worst SOS I've seen so far, and the first one to use the entire state seal, text and all, on a plain background. It has neither a distinct background like Delaware or New Jersey, nor identifiable heraldic supporters like Pennsylvania. It's just a messy circular seal on a solid blue field. Shame! Alright, let's unpack this mess. The seal depicts the frigate USS Raleigh, one of the first 13 warships sponsored by the Continental Congress for a new American Navy, built at Portsmouth in 1776. It's surrounded by a wreath containing 9 stars, symbolizing New Hampshire as the 9th state in the Union. The wreath itself has long been a symbol of honor and victory. The water represents the harbor of Portsmouth. The rising sun symbolizes Portsmouth becoming a major shipbuilding center, and the rock on the sand is granite, representing New Hampshire as the Granite State. The nickname refers both to the state's rugged landscape as well as the sturdy character of her people. Now that that's out of the way, here's my redesign. On the left, you'll see the Old Man of the Mountain. New Hampshireites love that symbol more than they love their flag. They put it on everything, including their highway signs and game wardens. I figured they may as well put it on their flag, too. I'm not the only one to have that thought, either. In 2004, the state legislature considered but ultimately rejected a proposal to incorporate the Old Man into the flag in memoriam of his collapse the preceding year. If the idea was just to jam him into an already busy design, I can't say they made the wrong call. That's why I started off from scratch with his profile adorning the hoist. Towards the fly, we have a horizontal tricolor of gold, blue, and white. The gold represents the rising sun. The blue is the waters of Portsmouth, and the white symbolizes granite for the Granite State. Perhaps a better color for granite would have been gray, but I maintain there's only one flag gray looks good on. The one true flag of Hello Internet. If you have a crippling fear of tricolors, I also made this alternative. It still has the Old Man of the Mountain and the white and blue for granite and Portsmouth, but I replaced the bars with the ring of 9 stars from the state seal, the one thing it had going for it. If you like both stars and stripes, I also made this, but I feel it's the weakest design of the 3. Number 10. Virginia. It seems we're closing this video out with yet another SOS, and yet another one which is literally just the entire state seal on a plain background. The seal of Virginia depicts virtue triumphing over tyranny. It also has the name of the state, in case you forgot, and the Latin motto Sic Semper Tyrannis, which means, "Shame on our terrible flag!" Virtus is a figure of peace, holding her spear point down and resting on it because the battle has been won. In her other hand, she carries an indistinct gray blob that could be anything from a stone slab to a giant bong, but which is allegedly a sheathed sword called the Perizonium, which is a badge of office and a symbol of authority rather than combat. As a symbol, it's most closely associated with Virtus, who was the Roman embodiment of courage, valor, excellence, manliness, and other masculine strengths, since it comes from the Latin vir, meaning man, and making it weird that Virtus is portrayed here as a woman. You can also tell she slept in a tank top because she's got one titty hanging out, making this the only case of nudity on a state flag. So, I guess that's something. The tyrant is holding a whip in one hand and chains in the other, which when combined with the semi-nude woman standing on his chest is making this flag more adult by the minute. It's already not safe for Tumblr with that salacious nip slip. The crown beside him represents the casting off of monarchic rule, and the Latin phrase beneath says, "Get your foot off my chest." You're welcome to groan at that, but that joke's been around since the 1860s. My redesign starts with a horizontal tricolor of blue, gold, and purple. The blue on top and the purple on bottom represents virtue's triumph over tyranny, and the jagged gold bar in the middle is an inverted crown symbolizing the overthrow of monarchy. The crown has 10 points because Virginia is the 10th state. In this edition, the white saltire represents a crossed spear and perizonium, but they're white to symbolize peace. They also form an X, the Roman numeral for 10. And that's this episode finished. Just like last time, the link to our Vexillologies page for my redesigns is in the video description, along with a link to my Twitter. Join me next week when I'll finish off the 13 colonies and break into the new states. Between now and then will be episode 2 of my other new series, How Fascinating, where I share fascinating trivia and snide remarks. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.